Hello there, and a very, very warm welcome to this special broadcast. Tonight, looking at a subject which unfortunately has not just angered an entire generation, an entire group of citizens across our country, but it has also made us wonder whether we knew exactly what was going on along the line of actual control along the Indo and Chinese border over the last few weeks. All kinds of spins and all kinds of interpretations were put up. But today, in collaboration with the GCTC group, which is one of the foremost organizations across the country, which looks at diplomacy and strategic affairs very, very closely, military affairs closely, it's a great pleasure to have so many, well, right minds, fine minds, who all have their own take on exactly what is happening, from top military experts to top diplomats like Ambassador Gautam Bambavle, to analysts like Madhav Nalpat, and a whole host of other individuals will be joining us on this broadcast tonight. The way we move forward is that we will try and keep it as interactive and as focused as possible. Our producers have lined up an entire list of questions, some images which we want to play, and just ensure that you all at the end of the day get the best possible experience, and the best possible insights into an exercise which clearly has taken us completely by surprise. So let me straight away begin with you, Ambassador Bambavle, and let me get to hear from you, sir. What do you make out, sir, of the situation where we are in today? The two foreign ministers of India and China now speaking after the death of 20 Indian soldiers, and both sides saying, no, 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 we're disengaging and we're de-escalating. Where does all this leave us, Ambassador Bambavle? So you need to unmute yourself, sir.
Thank you very much, Bhupen, and I'm happy to join all of you and the other distinguished panelists. Let me start by trying to explain to you and your viewers what exactly has been happening in especially the Galwan River Valley over the past few weeks. Basically, in early May, what the Chinese PLA tried to do was to move and change its actual ground position so that it would be in consonance with what in its own mind is its line of actual control. Now, we of course do not agree with what is the Chinese perception or the Chinese idea of its line of actual control, and therefore the Indian army blocked the Chinese army from moving towards what its objective was. When that happened, there was this face-off or standoff for so many weeks. And of course, when two armies are in close proximity to each other, the probability of losing control over what's happening on the ground is very high. And this is exactly what happened on the night of June 15th, and which has led to the death of 20 Indian soldiers and officers. But as you may also know, the Chinese military authorities have come out with a list of 30 Chinese soldiers and officers who have also been killed in this action. So there have been deaths on both sides. I would say this is a very serious situation. Also, in the course of doing what they were planning to do or wanting to do, but where they were blocked by the Indian army, was the fact that China broke every tenet and every part of so many agreements that have been concluded between India and China to maintain peace and tranquility in the border areas right since 1993. This is a serious situation, and to quickly come to the point that you are focusing on, which is what are India's options, I'm afraid that India will have to do a reappraisal of its China policy. I hope this is an all of India process, including opposition parties, think tankers, experts, military and diplomatic and other experts. And we have to come up with a new policy of to do with China and on India-China relations.
But my question, Ambassador Bambavle, is slightly different today. And what I want to do is, I want my producers to play these two statements which have been prepared. So there is a statement which has been put up by the Indian Foreign Ministry, and then there is a statement which has been put up by the Chinese Foreign Ministry. Now, these two statements are really a study in contrast. And this is what makes me wonder. This is what makes me wonder whether we really have a strategy or not. So, Dr. Janet Sharma, let me bring you in on this one, sir. Look at the statement which has been put up by the Indian side. This is what it says. At the conclusion of the discussion, it was agreed that the overall situation would be handled in a responsible manner and both sides would implement the disengagement understanding of 6 June sincerely. Neither side would take any action to escalate matters and instead ensure peace and tranquility as per the bilateral agreements. The Indian position. What is the Chinese position? Look at what the Chinese position is. And this is their statement. The two sides agreed to deal fairly with the serious events caused by conflict in Galewan Valley, jointly abide by the consensus reached at the military level meeting between the two sides, cool down the situation on the ground, and maintain peace and tranquility. Lieutenant Sharma, what I want to understand from you, sir, are Indians and the Chinese, are we speaking the same language, sir? Are we on the same side?
Thank you, Bhupen. What I would like to say is here that we've been talking for nearly 40 years. And this architecture that we have been referring to, the peace and tranquility architecture, which actually started in 1988, which means, or rather 1993, has been failing for last 7-8 years. This event of today has not happened today, but we go back to Samarlungpa, which is near Karakoram Pass. It happened in 12. In 13, it was a 3 weeks engagement in Rakinala. So it was building over a period of time. We were anticipating, and we were basking in the glory of saying no round has been fired from 1975 onwards. So, there is peace on this border because no round is fired. But the engagements were getting more and more tougher till it came to Doklam, where it was 72 odd days. And we have now come to a situation that we had actually 45 days. So despite the joint working groups, 15 meetings between 88 and 2003, and 22 SR meetings between 2003 and now, and thousands of meetings that have taken place at the military CBMs, no progress, not an inch of progress had been made over last 40 years between us and China. So the line of control, and actually it implies that they do not want to sort out the line of control. It is the leverage they want to hold on us. And then we come to this situation here. And why has this situation come up? So I will say that they knew that we are using the DSDBO road for last from 2002 onwards. I have myself driven on the road as a corps commander in 13-14 in the winter month when the river is frozen. They knew the bridge was being built over the last 3 years. There was no problem of this road. We made a new cantonment in Tangse, Darbok in the course of last 5 years. And then Nyoma. All this has not happened, no protest. Minute we started doing work on a feeder road to Galwan, his hackles stood up. And why there is hackles stood up is because Galwan leads on directly towards Aksai. He himself wants to prepare roads right till his, whatever he thinks is his line of control. But he doesn't want us to do anything of making roads on our own side. Can you hear me or you can't hear me?
Yes. No, I can. Go ahead, sir. Go ahead.
So, minute we started on a feeder road which led to Galwan Valley, and we were always last 6-7 years thinking of connecting finger 3 and finger 4. It's 1.5 kilometer of patch, rock face, and we were always been contemplating how to break the rock and do this. Minute we're coming close to him, the last mile connectivity, his hackles rose and he started this anguish here. All this while the policy of the military was to be a little more diplomatic, should we put it, a policy of appeasement, saying that we should not escalate issues with China. But now a situation has come that this is normal.
No, Sharma, do we trust the Chinese? That's why when I look at the intent of the statement, which is being put up by the Indian side on one hand, and the Chinese on the other, it doesn't inspire confidence in me. It doesn't make me feel as if this disengagement which is being spoken about is really going to happen, sir.
This is the point which you rightly referred to, is that Prime Minister Narasimha Rao's 1993 and Prime Minister Vajpayee's 2003 and 2005 and the BDCA, which meant you will amicably disengage, has been failing not today for a long time. So the trust deficit was being created and being created from 2012 onwards. It had come to a pass then when you were even normal times you're meeting each other, there was Gutham Gutha. And this Gutham Gutha was the trade, this deficit of, between our two nations was growing for a very long time, the trust deficit. And it has come to a pass, and the protocols have failed. The architecture has failed. The CBMs have failed. And let's be clear, we're a small group.
How do we believe them? Then how do we believe them? Let me bring in Madhav Nalpat on that on this one. Madhavji, let my producers play these satellite images which we've got from a Twitter user, and look at what these satellite images actually point out. What they point out, Mr. Nalpat, is that there is something seriously which has changed on the ground there, along the line of actual control. And this is courtesy Danish Siddiqui on Twitter. If you zoom in, you can actually see the phenomenal activity which is taking place. Now, military convoys, military personnel. Do I say that just because this foreign minister conversation has taken place between the two sides, do we say that all these people, all the Chinese soldiers now going to go back to the positions which they were holding on to earlier?
Well, Bhupen, I'd like to point out the Chinese concept of war is a bit different from the Indian or American concept of war. For us, war is, weapons, shooting, bombs, artillery. For them, it need not involve any of that. It simply means dominating the quote-unquote enemy or adversary. And if they can do that without a bullet being fired, as has happened over the last 40 years, frankly, so much the better. So, to say to ourselves that there is not an active border war because bullets have not been fired is to misunderstand the Chinese concept of war. And they have been, in my view, following the forward policy that we used to follow right up to 1962. Inch by inch, moving forward, and getting territory. Now, I wrote something in Sunday Guardian 23rd of May that, look, the Indian side believed China will never respond to this policy. They were wrong. China responded. Now, China obviously believes that India will not respond to their forward policy of, as General Sharma was saying, of which has gone on for decades without really being stopped. So this is another push forward in the forward policy. And it's a significant push, because I want to say one thing. If you look at the CPEC, China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. Now, the Chinese are very careful people. And even if it passes through Kashmir, which they publicly say is disputed, it's still called CPEC. What does that mean? It means that they tacitly acknowledge the POK as part of Pakistan, which essentially means they acknowledge the whole of Kashmir as part of Pakistan. So, from that, we have been pursuing, if I may say so, a policy which I don't think has been very nuanced. Okay, the entire Belt and Road thing is horrible. We are not going to take part in any of it. That's fine. But the fact is, the main worry for me was not the Belt and Road policy. In fact, there could have been ways in which India could have benefited from that if we had played a nuanced role. But the CPEC passing through POK and remaining named the CPEC. So increasingly, I have come of the view that the Chinese have accepted the Pakistan position on Kashmir, which brings me to another possible scenario. And my point is very simple, Bhupen. In our case, in India, we love happy endings. That's why Bollywood is so good. And we love, we don't like to look at unhappy endings. I'm told movies with unhappy endings, which are very common in Kerala, will be complete failures in the rest of India. But the fact is it that the Chinese are now planning, along with the Pakistanis, to do something which will try and de-link the Ladakh Union Territory from the rest of India? And then maybe having an quote-unquote amicable division. They take over Ladakh and the Pakistanis take over the valley. Now, frankly, I'm looking at facts on the ground. And for me, statements that are there, whether it's in People's Daily, Global Times, or frankly, foreign ministers' meetings, or even other meetings, they frankly mean nothing. The question is facts on the ground. Just as for me, public opinion in China means the small party journals in all kinds of faraway provinces which actually reflect the party view rather than the so-called party publications that the Chinese know all of us are going to read. So I'm beginning to really worry that there has been a fundamental change of tactics here, that Pakistan and China are on the same page. And you hear that you have ISI officers in the Central Military Commission, you've got them in Chengdu, they're now there in Tibet, they're very much there in Nepal, and so you've got a new front from Nepal, frankly. And of course, I must say that Oli is there because of India. 2 times we gave him a life, and possibly if he comes begging to us, we'll give him a 3rd life. I don't know. Because like I said, if you look at Bollywood movies, they're all wonderful people. We're all good people, quote unquote. So what I'm saying, Bhupen, something fundamental has changed. And I agree with the general. The existing structures, both of interpreting China and of talking to China, in my view, have yielded 0 result over at least the last maybe 8 or 9 years.
And do I hold anyone accountable? Good point. Good point. Let's just stay with that point. Let's just stay with that point, Madhav, for a moment, because I want to bring in General Shakti Gurung as well, who's there with us on the broadcast. General Gurung, look at the sentiment being expressed by Mr. Nalapat, that it is entirely plausible that for the act which was done by the Union government, where we removed Article 370 from from
that. I mean, that's an excuse.
I'm just saying there is a sentiment, General Gurung, which is being expressed by many, and I think Mr. Nalapat is only referring to that as well, that the Pakistanis and the Chinese may well have managed to come together in a very simple way of simply trying to tell the Indian side that fine, if you could have done this in Kashmir, we can do this here. And maybe Pakistan is simply, working in the background behind this kind of a strategy. Do you think, Jen Guru, that's something that India needs to be wary about? General Guru, can you hear me, sir?
I think he's signed off.
He signed off. Okay. General Ranbir, are you there, sir? I think I saw him. I saw him in a while back. Okay, Lieutenant General Sharma, why don't you take it, sir? Why don't you, maybe just to carry forward from what Madhavi is talking about? Is there that fear that the Pakistanis and the Chinese may well have managed to create a common cause today against India?
Okay, I take forward what Professor Saab was saying. I have studied Gilgit-Baltistan for quite some time. The nearest district next to Siachen Glacier in Gilgit-Baltistan is called Ganche. Ganche means glacier. They have Chinese have 300 leases for land lease for prospecting there of uranium and better metals. 2,000 leases in Gilgit-Baltistan alone. They have got a 750-acre SEZ coming up in a place called Mokpandas, which is between Gilgit and Skardu. So the Chinese are in a big way in Gilgit-Baltistan. So there is already a connivance of collusivity. On the northern sides, in the Karakoram tracts, the Shaksgam Valley, they are already building a 38 kilometers road which will finally connect across the Karakoram range, and then it will come somewhere between Skardu and Gilgit. So he doesn't have to go back to Munjareb and go down to Kasgar and then come down towards Hotan. A shortcut is being made. So actually, this wedge, this block that we have between Eastern Ladakh and the Saltoro Range, the Siachen Glacier, is what ties them away to each other, China and Pakistan. But it is not easy. I mean, one can't say casually that he can join these, both of them can collude together and join it. It is impossible. The quantum of force and the strength that we have, armed forces in this area, it is not feasible to be pushed aside. Even he can come to Galwan. And the defenses on the Pakistan side are superb, let me put it this way. So the point is, while they may attempt to collude, they know it is not going to be an easy task to do, to remove us from Eastern Ladakh and remove the Siachen, the Saltoro range, and also the defenses on Batalik, etc. And then I think we are imagining a little too far. And we can't have imagination going beyond limits.
Madhavji?
Look, as I said, I would just like to say, as analysts, we need to look at worst case scenarios. Number one. Number two, General Sharma is talking of a limited front war. Let's say you talk of escalation in that, multiple fronts, and you talk of fronts on different sides, on the east, on the west, and then and then let's say that, for example, India, we operationalize S-400, and thereby make the question of a detailed and in-depth alliances with the United States moot, because the US is walking away from Turkey because of S-400. They want to set up in India, but now we have got the S-400. And I'm afraid in our system, people seem to forget that Russia is not the Soviet Union. So, let's say worst case scenario for India, I agree with you. The great thing that we have got is the Indian soldier. And I think what happened on the 15th night, 16th morning shows the resilience of the Indian soldier. And the Indian soldier rose to the occasion. The errors made by analysts, whatever the policy errors that were made, the Indian soldier showed he's no pushover. And even if he's temporarily, taken by whatever, he can fight back. And I can tell you that's why I have every confidence that any such move will fail. But to completely write off the possibility of that happening, I have always said, Bhupen, we need now to take a holistic view of relations between China, Pakistan, Russia, and frankly, in that view, go in for an alliance which strengthens us. In 1971, I was very young at that time. My grandfather used to know the people in Delhi well. I used to tag along with him, and he was asking Mrs. Gandhi, "What happened? Why are you doing this Indo-Soviet deal? We are non-aligned." She said, "Mr. Nair, I have to go in and save the Bengalis from genocide. I don't want China on my back when I'm going in. I'm signing this." Let me tell you, Bhupen, we need a concrete ironclad security arrangement with the United States. And if that happens, I can tell you, these two countries are never going to attack. If the probability now is...
But I think we're jumping the gun. We're jumping the gun. Let's just stay focused on the issue in terms of what is it that India can really do. And Lieutenant General KJ Singh is joining us as well. Good evening, sir. Good point to bring you in on the show. Please explain to me. Please explain to me. Nice to see you, sir.
Bhupendra, can you hear me, please?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I can hear you. I can hear you loud and clear. I can hear you loud and clear.
There have been very erudite analysts like Professor Madhav Nalpat, General Rakesh Sharma, who's commanded 14 Corps. So, if I can chip, India does have certain options. Like in earlier debates, General Sharma had brought out that in Depsang, when Chinese had come, some counter move was done. However, in this case, scale of Chinese ingress, if we can call it, is too huge to think of a localized kind of a counter over there. But I'm sure our analysts are working out, our military leadership is definitely working out something that is not possible for us to discuss. It will also.
But can you tell me, sir, for 2 weeks, India was told that there is no Chinese aggression. We were told that all Chinese soldiers have gone back to their positions. Now suddenly last night word comes in that 20 Indian soldiers have been martyred, and all of us are raising this question that, well, what is the option that India has? I want to know from you, sir, how was it serving India's interests for us not to accept that this had happened? Did it not complicate, did it not weaken India's case at the outset itself?
See, if I could roll back the time, then what you say, we can consider those possibilities. But maybe through the diplomatic and other backdoor channels, we were being given that hope that this will get resolved at military level. So there was this expectation. But somewhere we always go wrong. Chinese follow that salami slicing. You come 2 steps forward, locally resolve, take 1 step back, and in the process, people forget that additional 1 step. Something like that happened in Doklam. That local face-off was resolved, and now Chinese are sitting behind with huge number of structures, helipads, and other ancillary things. But Bhupendra, let me also put it to you. There is a downside to all this. When China had great asymmetry over us. So Chinese used to sit behind and come like bandits and roving patrols and come and check their claim lines. Today, China is increasingly being forced to go on ground, and that has costs. That has got penalties. It is also signaling some kind of a fear in Chinese mind. See, if you look at 65 war, it was based on think tanks. Professor Nalpat will be able to vouch for that, where some American think tanks told Pakistan that this is the only moment in which you can launch a war against India and put it across to them. Probably this time Chinese felt that if they delay it any further, our infrastructure will catch up. We were linking up with axial roads and few other things. And Chinese believe in that proverb, when somebody's house is on fire, that is the best time to loot. So they came with something like this. But allow me to tell you that situation is bad, is not good. But if I were China, and if I get this message that I have lost more than, say, 12, 13, 14, 15, it's a subject matter of discussion, including a CEO. And if it is 43, then definitely that message goes to Chinese also, that Indians are not going to take it like this. They are not pushover.
What
Even
is
if you,
Let's
Bhupendra, one more thing.
Yeah,
Bhupendra, one more thing.
just an important point, very important point you make, and I want to toss that straight away to Ambassador Bombable, because because this is I last 24 hours, Ambassador, I've been told by multiple sources that you got to watch out for how the Chinese state media reports what has happened last time. If they make a big song and dance about it, then that means that the Chinese are in the mood, well, to stretch it further. If they don't, and I've seen all of, on social media, whatever reportage is going on from Chinese state media, it appears that they're not really playing this story up. In that scenario, what's the key takeaway for India, Ambassador Bombable?
Look, I have already made my point about what the key takeaway is, irrespective of various scenarios, etc., which need to be kept in mind. I agree with all that. But what the Chinese were trying to do on the ground was to close the gap between their actual ground positions and their idea of where their LAC lies. And this is what they were trying to do in Galwan. They were blocked by the Indian Army. And of course, we know what has happened. I must also add, for information, I think not everyone is informed that the Chinese military has come out about an hour ago, maybe 2 hours ago, with a list of 30 soldiers, including 6 officers who have been killed on their side. So this is a fact. And I think the Indian Army has performed brilliantly. I agree entirely with Professor Nalapat. What we need to do from here onwards, and that is the question you're focusing on, Bhupen, is we need to have a reassessment of the way we deal with China, our China policy. And for that, I think all our heads should come together, irrespective of party lines, and we need to make a new policy about how we will handle and deal with China.
But let me put it this way, sir. And a lot of our viewers who are on this broadcast are asking us this question, then do we then take this purely as a local border conflict where, well, forces on the two sides get engaged in a local conflict, and do I just take it at that? Or do we look at it, as Professor Nalapat points out, that there is a larger design, that there was a larger scheme, that there was a method to this matters that we're talking about?
No, I agree with the point that Professor Nalapat has made, that we should not look upon it as purely a localized kind of outburst or a eruption. We have to look for the larger picture, and that is why I am arguing that it is necessary for a reassessment in India amongst all the people who know this subject, and to come to a new policy of how to tackle and handle China,
what could that be,
including militarily.
Yeah, throw some light, sir. I mean, again, a view which has been conveyed to me by multiple sources in the government as well as within the military is that the Indian Army today is obviously not where the Indian Armed Forces were, way back in the 60s. That today we want to give it back. If somebody attacks us, well, we'll also attack them. Be that as it may. But do you think this Chinese conflict can be settled militarily, sir?
No, I don't think the conflict can be settled militarily, because both sides are very, very strong. And as you have rightly pointed out, eventually there are nuclear options for both sides, which of course I don't want to go down that road. But I think it has to be settled diplomatically. And I agree with the point you made earlier that it is time now to accelerate the process of settling the boundary between India and China. Because if there's a clear-cut line which both militaries agree to, these incidents will not happen in the future.
Professor Nalapad, line of actual control has been a contentious subject. And another top former diplomat is joining us. Shashank is joining us as well. But let me just stick with you for a moment, Professor Nalapad. How do I respond to this position? If something which has not been settled for so long, and at a time 24 hours after the Chinese are coming out with, well, unfortunately, their list of body bags, and we have lost our own soldiers, they've been martyred, do we say that this is also in some way the best position in which we can settle this boundary dispute between the two countries? You need to unmute yourself. Yes, yeah.
What is worrisome to me is the fact that the behavior of Chinese troops is now beginning to approximate the behavior of Pakistan troops. So it's not that Pakistan is becoming more responsible, it's that China is becoming more like Pakistan. And the behavior of the soldiers, from what I can hear from media reports and from whatever, I mean, it has been quite, definitely not behavior which a normal military would do. And that is a very worrisome point. The Chinese have not set the LAC something with satellite technology on either side. I mean, it's very easy to sort out the LAC. Even the middle sector, the Chinese have not sorted out. Why? Because the Pakistanis have told them don't sort it out. And the Chinese believe that keeping the Pakistanis, putting pressure on India is helpful to them, because they are now, they have for long regarded India the same way as the United States now regards China, as a potential equal and rival. So the point is very simple, Bhupen. We have to be realistic about China. We have to be realistic about the situation. And above all, the wider Indo-Pacific. You are now seeing a change in the world, in that now once again it is the same USSR versus US, or so-called free world versus the communist world. Today you are seeing a clear split between logistics chains, technology chains, business chains, and political chains between the Sino-Russian combination, which includes Iran, which includes Pakistan, which includes some other countries, and the rest of the world. Now, India, if you're non-aligned in a wall, that's fine. But if the wall is cut in half and the two halves start moving away from each other, you're going to be in an extremely uncomfortable position. Therefore, when it's time we look closely at the future, time we look closely at the immediate past in terms of what happened. Let's not pat ourselves on the back because we've had tea and cakes in somewhere, and we've had lovely meetings and well-drafted statements. But the fact is, we need to get a holistic view of our security, and we need to secure the Indo-Pacific. In that, the Indian Navy is important. The Air Force is important. The Air Force should have been used in 62. And the Army is very, very important.
Yeah, I hear this very clearly from you, Professor Nalapad, and I hear this from all of you. You cannot continue to engage with the Chinese on the territory which has been created so far, both diplomatically as well as militarily. Shashankji, for another ace diplomat, is live with us as well. Shashankji, please explain to me, sir. Two things I'm very clear about. Don't trust the Chinese. Well, create a new template to engage with them. But then I get a little confused, because I see the scope of economic cooperation between India and China. Still, some of the biggest economic projects are being given to China. So on one hand, we need their economic might. But we say, no, we must rework and we must revisit our template of engagement with them. How is that going to play out, Shashankji? Okay, I think there's an internet issue. Professor Swaran Singh, can you hear me, sir?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, so let me take that
question
to you. Yeah, let me take that question to you. If we need the Chinese in terms of our economic growth, but we are not going to trust them, and we're going to say that we must have a separate template to engage with them, how are we going to walk on these two contrarian paths?
I think in large countries which are rapidly developing large economies, it's not going to be a perfect friendship ever. So certain amount of skepticism we have to live with, and that's going to be normal. So it's not to say that India will either, build all the bridges and be friendly with China or, have nothing to do with Chinese. These shades will continue over a period of time. And I think we will not only need China, China needs India. You see, when rest of the world demand is going down, the biggest market for both trade and investment for China, very essential for them to keep their growth rates, is India. So they need us just as much as we need them. The trade has become one-sided over a period of time. We need to really look at that, rectify that. A lot of imports can have substitutions at home. But I think immediate concern for all of us here is that in last 3 decades, we had built certain mechanisms both on the border between ministries, etc., to deal with tensions on the border. And I think they have become outdated as of now, because series of meetings on the border, and still the tempers were so high that even in disengagement, such an incident happened. So what we are saying here, we can talk of long-term building armed forces, building, Indo-Pacific, building United States. Fantastic. That is what India needs to do. But if you look at the, immediately the border situation, what we are saying is that the border, talking mechanisms or talking to each other, consultative mechanisms, they have proven to be really fragile. Things on the ground, shown the tempers have gone so high that even when troops were disengaging, such a major incident under the watch of these people who were negotiating on the border, military leaders were there in the field. So I think we need to look at those mechanisms. Do we need to start a new chapter from simply peace and tranquility to now moving a step ahead and at least sharing the maps with each other as to let's know what are your claims.
Yes. Go
I
ahead,
want to take a minute and say there's a black-white kind of thing, a false notion that it's either one thing or the other. Take my own case. I have favored India buying oil from Iran, substantial quantities of Iran oil, defying US sanctions, because Chabahar and Iran is so important for us. I have favored an Indian squadron in 2014, landing up in Damascus to help Bashar Assad, and in Baghdad to help the Baghdad government. I think Professor Swaran Singh will agree. These are not stances that are popular in Washington, and they were not stances that were popular with my friends there. Or there are some stances I'm taking here which are not popular with my friends in Beijing. The problem is we have this Bollywood fantasy of good and bad, or good always being good. The fact is, it's a nuanced situation.
No, but let me take you up on that. Let me take you up on that. You say, sir, I take your point. I take your point that in diplomacy as well as in military strategies, you have to operate in the area of gray. But please tell me, when you have a scenario where for domestic political consumption, when the home minister of the country starts making these statements, in previous governments, Chinese soldiers would come do picnic and, people would get away, and see how muscularly we are dealing with them. I'm told apparently these kind of statements which are made for internal political, satisfaction here, for political dividends back home, they don't go down too well with the Chinese authorities. I want to know, do you think the Indian present political establishment really has a strategy to deal with China? Are we looking at them? No, let's try and bring them, convert them into good people.
No, I just like to say that our messaging has to be such in a language that will be comprehended in the correct way by the other side. And for example, when a lot of our politicians start talking about Aksai Chin and POK in the same breath, I have never talked of Aksai Chin, frankly. Never. I've talked of recovering POK multiple times. I've never talked of recovering Aksai Chin the way some of our politicians and others have. It may be interpreted one way. That I'll give you an example, Bhupen. A few days before this Chinese atrocity on our soldiers, some of the very senior people, in high positions in India, started talking about disengagement and peace and all that. It may have given the Chinese the view, oh well, we have intruded into Indian territory. I mean, which is our territory, and these guys are now talking about peace. So obviously they've accepted it. So when they find our soldiers coming in and saying, sorry, you've been intruded, I mean, their view is that the Indian establishment accepted it. We have to be very careful about the messaging that we do, because the messaging that we do for the Indian audience may be entirely different, and the audience in China may take it very differently.
That's the point I'm making. So when we say on one hand that we need to figure, we can't be taking this good versus bad kind of a scenario, then I want to know, well, our political class also needs to be savvy enough to understand this. You try and keep punching someone as a villain because it gives you some political dividends in elections, and then suddenly when something like this happens, then you start looking for a diplomatic solution. Sharma, how does that work out then, sir?
No, Bhupen, I'll tell you, Chinese are quite used to people abusing them, and they abuse people. And so long as they can get some advantage out of it, they don't care who's abusing them, so long as they can get advantage out of it. The Chinese are grown up, and I think we also have to be grown up in that.
With you, change the strategy.
But I just want to say, there have been no cost for these 10 years. You've still got Huawei coming in. You've still got a $60 billion deficit with China. You've still got contracts going to Chinese companies.
That's what I'm trying to understand. How do you walk these roads together, Sharma?
Yeah, Bhupen, if you follow the history of our relationship, and you all know better, we have a larger policy of appeasement, and it is continued over last 60 years. In all our dealings, whether they are diplomatic or military or economic, there has been an underlying theme of appeasement, and it comes out across to people who are actually on the borders, and it comes out strongly because everything is laid down by something called China Study Group, which laid down restrictions of not going petrol point 14, 15, all laid down by China Study Group. So that appeasement policy takes us that we have to fight day for yesterday as Guttam Gutta. This is larger policy of appeasement that we have against China. A soldier, I would hate to the idea. I've been not trained to use a danda. I've been used to use trained to use a rifle and a bullet. But this is the larger appeasement. The thought process is that do not rile China. But China can do whatever it feels like to rile us in every fora when we want to do it. Even in the worst of times, it's taken us to United Nations Security Council. In each one of its steps, it wants to, to put it colloquially, finger us. And we have appeasement policy. Please don't do it. They'll get annoyed. Don't take weapons. Don't get in touch with them. Show a banner. Move back. So, this policy, appeasement policy, has actually, you have asked a soldier. Yesterday, he was on the Pakistani border. He was allowed to open an artillery gun on his own. Today, he comes to the Chinese border and he says, no, leave your weapon behind, take a danda ahead. How much of confusion we have caused to the people who are actually practitioners. Time has come for us to revise that appeasement policy, understanding that this country is not going to mend its ways. I don't want war. Soldiers hate war. But the fact is that you got to prepare for it and you have to show eyes. If a bully as a child catches my collar and I'm weak, he'll hit me hard. If he's a bully and I say, sorry, I don't agree with you on this one, and you do what you feel like, well, he will mellow down. We have to form a policy to say he's come to Galwan today. Tomorrow, I'm sure you will come to Samarlungpa. If you come to Samarlungpa, fine, you come to Samarlungpa. I'll go and sit in A, B, C, and D, maybe in Arunachal Pradesh, to say, okay, quid pro quo, you do what you feel like, I do what you feel like. We have to do our way. That appeasement policy, and this Guttam Gutta is, I'm ashamed, that we have to do Guttam Gutta. Somebody should have caught this rifle and then go. That is the point. We have to behave like nature. We are not a banana republic. We are a large country. We have a standing of our own. We have
have a uniform policy. Shashankji, if you're there and if you can hear me, sir, your camera has switched off again, unfortunately. But if you can hear me, Shashankji, I was keen to hear from you, sir. I mean, Guttam Gutta, need to have a uniform policy. I hear all these points. I want to know that why is it so difficult to have this uniform policy, Shashankji? Okay, I think there's a problem with Shashankji. As a Bambable, as a diplomat, sir, why is it so difficult to create a policy? We know that the present policy is not working. So I want to know, going forward, why is it so difficult to create this policy?
No, it's not difficult to create a policy. Let me explain to you a little bit, Bhupen, about the current template or paradigm of India-China relations was the one which was worked out and set in 1988 when the then Prime Minister of India visited China. Obviously, since then, 30 odd years have gone by. China has changed, India has changed, the world has changed. and therefore there is a need for a new template, a new paradigm for doing India-China relations, for conducting the relationship. This is exactly what was attempted. We tried to attempt to find a new template or a new paradigm, both at Wuhan and Mamlapuram. Unfortunately, it is still a work in progress. And that is why I come back to my point. This is the time for a national discussion on how to deal with China, how to have a new China policy as we move ahead into the third decade of the 21st century. And all these inputs from all the people here today will form an input into taking a decision about what that new policy should be, whether we should not have dandas and we should go with our guns. All that is up to debate. So this is the point I've been trying to make to you, Bhupen, and to all the others. Thank you.
All right, gentlemen, thank you so much. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us. I hear, yes, General Kamaljeet Singh, final words from you, sir.
Bhupendra, I want to say, I support Jan Sharma. This appeasement that we have been doing, and this, policy which is always made by this China study group. Now, these are operational activities. Why don't we have Pakistan study group? Why are we having this China study group? So let us do it operationally, properly, signal our resolve that side. And I am worried on one account, which has not got addressed somehow, or may have been addressed when I didn't join. I believe there was a brigadier of Chinese army at Galwan, where this face-off took place. And he tried to tell his soldiers, don't do it, go back. Situation has degenerated to a situation where, like Professor Swarang Singh was saying, that the protocols have got destroyed. A Chinese brigadier is not able to stop his soldiers, and they are engaging in Guttam Gutta. So it is high time that we get serious about this damn issue and resolve it. And let's not have these so-called China study groups dictating the policy. If it is required, then I would recommend that somebody from MEA should be posted to each command headquarters. Put one chap in Corps headquarters in 14 Corps and resolve the issues there, because these are operational issues.
So once again, I hear from the military experts a certain tone in voice, and I hear from the diplomatic experts a certain tone in voice. That's been the problem, frankly, when it has come to dealing with China for so many years. But gentlemen, thank you so much for this rather enlightening session. What we hear from all of you is very clear. We need to have a new template with the Chinese. We cannot have this Guttam Gutti and Danda kind of approach, as General Sharma was talking about. A time to take the bull by its horns. If the dragon has to breathe fire, we must be ready to face up to that fire. No point in trying to duck the fire. Won't get us anywhere. Gentlemen, thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us. Stay safe, stay well.